Well, when we think of hope for the home, or a home filled with hope, that's what this series has been. Today's our last day on the series. We're going to kick off the book of Ruth next week and talk about her situation as far as family and home and lineage and all of that. It's pretty exciting. We talked about dealing with our past as far as not just our own specific past, but maybe even our generational past with parents and grandparents and on and on, and being aware of what might have been being passed down through there, and not that, in Christ we're free from every curse, every generational thing there might be, but it's good for us to acknowledge those things and become aware of them and see if they're still at play in our lives, and if we are passing them down to our children or the people God's calling us to love, and if we are, then we build the dam, as Joel taught us about his dad did for him. He built the dam so that Joel could live and his brothers could live free from what his dad had to deal with growing up. And so we did that. The next week we talked a lot about forgiveness, how one of the things that we deal with, the junk in our lives or the challenges that we face is forgiveness. Unforgiveness really can become resentment, and resentment always produces horrible things. We talked about resentment is basically drinking poison and saying, I can't wait to see you die. It's foolish. But yet, we harbor all these things sometimes, so we tried to get clear, and we'd practice on Wednesday nights, and we had 2 teachings on Sunday mornings about forgiveness. And then the concept today now is, okay, we're clear from the past, we're clear from resentment. See, we're all perfect now. And now we want to be able to look forward and begin to see, okay, the hope that's come into my life, that the Lord has given me, how is it directing me into? And so the message today is titled, To Be Fully Present and Invested in the Family That God Has Called You to Going Forward. Now, it's a complicated thing because the family God has called you to might look different than what you wanted the family to look like that God has called you to. There's all kinds of things that happen in our households, things like the death of a parent or a child, divorce, remarriage, or blended families, adultery, abuse, neglect, dysfunction, unhealth. All of these things come into our homes at some point, and they break our home, or they change the dynamic of our home. And every single person in this room could probably say, yeah, we've been through that season, or we're in it right now with one of those things. And so when we look forward, when we're thinking about, okay, the family God has called us to, it might not look like, mom, dad, a couple kids. 2.5, I think, is really what you're supposed to have. Mom, dad, 2.5 children. Not quite sure how to do the 0.5, but my family looks very different than that today. Basically, my household is different than most people. I was looking up the households around the world. You've got the household in the U.S., average household 2017 was 2.6. Average household in Mexico, 3.7. Average household in Israel, 3.1. Congo, 4.1. You ready for this? In Iraq, 7.7. Yeah. But we got them all beat. My home situation right now consists of my wife and I, our 3 daughters, our 2 foster boys, my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law, my brother-in-law, their 5 kids, all of our 6 chickens, all of our 5 dogs, a guinea pig, and we do have a partridge in a pear tree. No, we don't have a partridge in a pear tree. That might be this year. We're hoping for that. That's kind of our situation at this point. And it's wonderful. It really is. We're getting along, so it's wonderful. The minute we don't get along, not wonderful anymore. We used to have 8 chickens. The coyotes and the chickens, they didn't get along too good. That's not what the coyotes say. They thought it went great, but the chickens didn't really appreciate it that much. But whatever your home situation is, there's a calling. God has called you to care for your home. And the way that you're going to be able to go forward, the way that you're going to be able to be fully present and be invested in whatever the situation God has you in is hope. You've got to have hope. Hope is the absolute expectation of coming good. And hope is possible no matter what the situation is because of Jesus Christ. He is the overcomer. He's conquered sin and death and all that sin and death can bring into our lives. And if we hold his hand and hang on with hope, we will see what He has in store for us. I have a couple things to say about that. We've shared stories from people who have had horrible dads, to divorce, to remarriage, to adoption, to abuse, and how Christ has brought healing, forgiveness, reconciliation, and peace. Our desire for this series is to bring hope to our home situations, whatever it may be. With Christ, all things are possible. With Christ and time, all sadness will come untrue, is what the gospel preaches. Whoever has this hope, the Bible says, has an anchor for his soul. Whoever has this hope purifies himself even as Christ is pure. Whoever holds on to this hope will in time be healed and restored and made whole. And we've shared story after story of that, of how that has taken place. And when I think of hope, I think of two kinds of hope. There's the hope that we have in Christ of the life to come, right? The hope of heaven, the hope promised in the Apostles' Creed. I believe in the resurrection of the body and life everlasting. Jesus said when you face various trials and tribulations, He said, remember that I'm going to prepare a place for you where there will be no more of that. Revelation 21 teaches us that there's going to be this time where God will be the light and there will be no more darkness. There'll be no more sorrow, no more tears. No more pain, no more death. No more confusion about who we are and where God is. Because He's going to be right there among us and we're going to be with Him. We have all these promises. One of my favorite ways that this hope of heaven is fleshed out is in the words of John Foreman, one of my favorites. He says, until the sea of glass we meet, at last completed and complete, when the tide of tear and pain subside and laughter drinks them dry, I'll keep waiting. I'll keep hoping. I'll keep fighting. I'll keep believing. I just love that. Every time I think that, I go, yeah, let's get this thing. And we have this hope of the life to come. And it is true that somehow how we navigate this life does affect that life. Our capacity in some way, shape, or form. But what I'm so thankful, and it took me a long time to realize, but I've experienced it, and the scriptures teach it, is that we don't just have hope for the life to come. Jesus has plans, good plans for us in this life as well. Psalm 27, verse 10 through 14, basically summarizing says, though my father and mother forsake me, though I am oppressed, though false witnesses rise up against me, I remain confident of this. I will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. In the land of the living. That is a promise to you and I. Though my father and mother forsake me, though I am oppressed, though false witnesses rise up against me, I remain confident of this. I will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. That is a hard thing to hold on to because we see other things in the land of the living as well. But that is our call. That is where we have to start from. If you don't have hope, you don't have fuel for the journey. If you don't have hope, you're not going to know which way to go and how hard to run, and you're not going to make it. Hope is so vital. And that's what we've been praying for you and for ourselves through this fasting and prayer season, is that hope really would just flood into our homes and into our hearts. Tonight, that's what we're going to do in this worship night. We're just going to rejoice in hope. We're going to let the hope become the anthem within us. We're going to ask the Lord to just continue to infuse us with His hope. Not the hopes that we come up with or society, like, yeah, just come up with a dream, believe, and a dream is a wish your heart makes. Cinderella. No, but the hope that God plants in us. A hope that will never disappoint. That's what we're going for tonight. All right, so now I want to talk a little bit about being fully present and invested in the family God has called you to. Some verses that I want to read for you. If you want to grab a Bible and turn to 1 Timothy 5, we're going to read some scriptures there, but I want to throw some scriptures out that most of you probably know, but it gives us a reminder as to how important it is to God that we care for our families, the people that He's brought into our lives. Exodus 20, verse 12, one of the 10 commandments. The only commandment that comes with a promise from God attached right to it. Honor your father and mother, that your days may be long in the land the Lord is giving you. It's very important to the Lord that we honor our fathers and mothers. Psalm 133, how good and how pleasant it is to the Lord when brothers and sisters live together in unity. When we get along, it makes the Lord's heart so happy. And there He commands a blessing. Psalm 127, behold, children are a heritage from the Lord, the fruit of the womb a reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior are the children of one's youth. Blessed is the man whose quiver is filled with them. He will not be put to shame when he speaks with his enemies in the gate. I don't know exactly why those are connected, but the whole message here is that children are a blessing and a gift from the Lord, even if you have 5 of them under 5. And some of you are like, man, I used to think that when they were just small and not so painful. But the scriptures are true no matter what the situation is. We got to hold on to hope. Got to hold on to hope. Ephesians 5, husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave Himself up for her. Whoa. That is some serious loving. Valentine's Day is a-coming. And for all of you people who are like, oh, Valentine's so stressful. Brittany's birthday is Valentine's Day. So don't tell me any about that. It's true, it is, and whew, serious. Proverbs 17, children's children are a crown to the aged, and parents are the pride of their children. It's true, even if it's a little bit messed up or cockeyed right now, it's true. It's the way it's supposed to be. And not having a mom and dad at this point, and having my mom and dad never meet my wife and my kids, I can tell you this is true, and it's a heartbreak. And now it's become one of my life goals to become a grandpa. Like people ask me, what do you want to be when you grow up? They still ask me that, which is kind of cool. Sometimes. And I mean, literally, that's my answer now. I just want to be a grandpa. Because my kids miss that, you know. I just want to be a grandpa. Some of you are like, maybe. I do. I want to be a grandpa. And then this, you ready for this? This is some serious Pauline theology, practical teaching right here. 1 Timothy 5. We'll do verse 3 through 8. Give proper recognition to those widows who are really in need. But if a widow has children or grandchildren, these should learn first of all to put their religion into practice by caring for their own family, and so repaying their parents and grandparents, for this is pleasing to God. The widow who is really in need and left all alone puts her hope in God and continues night and day to pray and to ask God for help. But the widow who lives for pleasure is dead even while she lives. Just going after widows right there. Give the people these instructions so that no one may be open to blame. Anyone who does not provide for their relatives, and especially for their own household, has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. Whoa. And then if you read that, you should read this tonight. Paul is like, He's mad at widows. I didn't know you were allowed to do that. But he's mad at widows, and he's basically like saying there's good widows and bad widows, and he's mad at the bad widows. And it sounds funny, but you can read it there. But basically what he's saying here in 1 Timothy, he's saying, Timothy, a lot of times it seems like people are now looking to you, Timothy, as a leader of the church, or looking to the church to care for their families, and in particular in the area of widows. And Paul's saying, no. If a widow has any family around her at all, they're the ones that should be caring for the mom or the dad in that situation. He's basically saying to the families, hey, quit looking to the church or to the temple or to whatever to care for the people that you're supposed to be taking care of. And he goes on to say, if you're not the one taking care of your family, if your family is in need and you're not stepping up to take care of it, he says it's worse than being an unbeliever. And Paul has a lot to say about those people too. The emphasis here is just how important it is that we're supposed to be caring for the people that God has connected us with. You know, and then you can go on to the next thing. Jesus, he broadened a little bit. He said, here's the greatest commandment of all. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, and strength. Not just in a church setting, not just in a kind of spiritual setting. He's saying, love God in every way possible. And the second commandment is like it in greatness and importance. Love your neighbor as yourself. And then he goes on and there's a little discussion, well, who is my neighbor? And in that situation, the Samaritan cared for the non-Samaritan. And Jesus was saying, this is the way I want you to do it. So Jesus broadened it, not just your blood relatives, but he's adding to that, saying there are all other people that Jesus has put into your life that he wants you to care for as well. But don't ever forget the people that are your blood connected to. It's your responsibility to care for them. And other cultures, as far as elderly, do a lot better job of this than us in America. And the one thing that stands out is just how we just kind of push the elderly out and about. And I'm not saying it's not wrong to put somebody in a home or to get care for them, but you don't replace yourself. You got to be there. You got to be with them. And maybe they should be living in your home with all the chaos it might bring. Maybe they shouldn't. But it's a very important lesson that the Scripture is trying to remind us that we're supposed to be caring for people. And when he's talking about these widows, he's talking about how they're just kind of, now that they're, in this situation, they're just kind of being selfish. And selfishness is something we have to fight against. And we have these promises of retirement, and kind of once you get done with your work and you get done with your family, then you can just indulge and live for yourself. And sometimes it's subtle and can sneak in there. We have to fight against that. It's not the way God's asking us to live. Stay in the mess. Get your hands dirty. I don't know. I'm not retired. But I think this is a little bit of what Paul's talking to. And I see it in our culture that I think it's not the way that God would want us to live. Not the way he would want us to go. But here are some things that can keep us from being fully present. So we understand that God is wanting us to be fully present, that we're not getting and having so that we can serve ourselves, but it's so that we can care for the people he's put in our lives. And if we're caring for the people that he's put in our lives and they're caring for us, then everybody's getting cared for. I mean, the concept in the Garden of Eden, when God saw that he made this good world and there was goodness in the world, basically what he created to maintain the goodness of the world was family. A mom and a dad who take care of the kids. It's this small group plan, Everybody will be cared for if in every household there's a mom and a dad caring for them. And just because we've messed it up and it's got all screwy at this point, doesn't mean that's still not the good plan for the Lord. That we care for the people that share our name, share our blood. But here are the things that can keep us from being fully present. You can't be fully present if you're not whole. And we've talked about some of the things dealing with our past that have maybe brought some unhealth into our lives, or resentment or harboring, where we just we're not whole. We're broken. So that's important. You can't be fully present if you're drunk or high, just in case you didn't know that. When you show up in your family and you're drunk or high, they're not really getting all of you or the good of you. You can't be fully present if you're worn or stressed out all the time. You can't be fully present in your family if you're giving too much of yourself to work or to play. Either one of those things. And many of us are guilty of that, for sure. And you can't be fully present if you're hiding something. And I would just want to say, I am so proud of some of the people in this church who in the last couple of months have just said, I'm not going to hide anymore. And they have brought to light some things that they have done or have hidden among their own lives, and they've brought it to the light, not sure what's going to happen in their family or their marriage or whatever, but they've done it as an answer to the call of God on their life, and they're now living free. And they're walking in the consequences of some of those actions, yet they're moving forward in hope and allowing God to be God and allowing Him to decide how things are going to play out. And it is so scary and so amazing what some people have done, and I'm so proud of them. And if you're still hiding something, just stop it. Just go for it. Bring it to the light. Bring it to the light. Do it in the right way, at the right time, but bring it to the light. And allow the healing and wholeness of God to begin to form in your heart and mind. And this Freedom Immersion Retreat that we're putting on in February, it's basically like this whole series, we're trying to get our homes filled with hope. And that Freedom Immersion weekend, if you come that Friday and Saturday, by the end of it, you will have a heart full of hope. You will be so sorted out. You will be like, yeah, this feels like I'm really living now. I'm running on all cylinders again instead of just one cylinder that's kind of not so good. That's what that's all about. It's kind of a condensed, make sure we get it all figured out time. I'd really encourage you to check it out, whether you're doing well or not. But it'll fill your heart with hope, which is really the first step to getting your home filled with hope. But these are the things that keep us from being fully present and invested. And it's so fun to look at Christ's example. His life, Jesus and the woman of the issue of blood. Many of you know the story. Jesus is walking through a whole crowd of people. And as he's walking through that crowd of people, all of a sudden there's this one lady he doesn't know anything about. She sneaks up behind him and she touches the hem of his garment, which always is weird to me because like what was he wearing, if it's got a hem and a garment. But she touches the hem of his garment and she's healed. She's had this issue of blood for like 38 years, and now she's healed. She's completely better. And she knows it, and no one else knows it, and not even Jesus really knows it, but all of a sudden Jesus stops in the midst of this crowd where everybody's bumping into each other, and he said, "Who touched me?" And the disciples are like, everybody? Me? Probably. And he said, "No, somebody touched me. I felt power released." And I think of Jesus in that moment, in that crowd, in that situation, being so present, so whole that he could even tell when somebody sneaked up and touched him and got some healing. And he calls out the woman and talks to her and kind of sets everything right. In another crowd, he's walking down the street, and he's the only guy that notices there's this little man in a tree. What was his name? Zacchaeus. He's a wee little man. And Jesus stops in the crowd, and then he's just so fully present in this moment. He knows what's happening. He looks up and he says, Zacchaeus, come down from that tree. I'm coming to your house for dinner. And when he goes there, Zacchaeus has this major change in his own heart and change in his own home, and he basically pays back everybody 10 times what he had taken from them. It was amazing. And on and on and on, you see Jesus as he walked among us, just fully present. And what was required of that is Jesus, even though he was God, he wasn't just able to do that for no reason. He was also fully human, and so he'd have to pull himself away oftentimes and get alone with the Father, get filled up by the Father. And then he would go back into the crowds and do the ministry and love on the people God was bringing to him. But being fully present and invested in the family God has called you today, it's an awesome New Year's resolution. It's an awesome goal for you and I. And some of you are really bad at it. And you got to change. You're missing so much life and hope and joy that God has for you and your family. And an extra bit of money on a paycheck, it's just not worth it. And the society around us is going to continue to tell you, no, it is worth it. You should be doing it. It's wisdom, but it's not the wisdom of God. Fully present, fully invested in the most important thing in your life, which is your family, the ones God is calling you to love. And I want to bring up a friend of mine who, to me, is just an example of this. Hasn't been easy, but he's someone that has processed all of this, and he's fought against the challenges, and he's now figured out how to be fully invested and fully present in his family, even though his family doesn't look exactly the way he had dreamed at this point. And even though he's had to fight against a lot of stuff in his past, he's right there today. So Joe, will you come on up and share a little bit of Maxton goodness?
That's some good-looking people.
Yes.
You're a lucky guy.
There's a lot of them, too. They're filling up this place.
Yeah, Chris was right. There's a lot more of you than last time I was up here. So when I was 18, I found out that the man I'd been raised with wasn't my dad. It was pretty devastating for me. I grew up in a really pretty awful home. My mom left me when I was 13. I had a significant amount of childhood trauma. So when I got to 18 and found out the man who actually wasn't a very good guy anyway wasn't my dad, I was quite devastated. Life continued just to seem to get worse and worse. I had spent a couple of years trying to find out who my real dad was. Asked family members. I did a nationwide search, and I just could not find who my dad was. I was just in this place where I had a relationship with the Lord, and I was just at my wit's end, and I just came to the Lord, and I'm just like, I don't understand. It's like, why am I not loved? Why doesn't somebody care about me? And the Lord took me to two different places in Scripture. Deuteronomy 31:6 says, "Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified because of them. For the Lord your God goes with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you." And Romans 8:15 says, "The Spirit you received brought about your adoption to sonship. And by him we cry, Abba, Father." I felt God say, I'll be your dad. I will fill in the gaps. I will be there. I will always be there, no matter what. So it took me to this place of where I had a family that did not look like a normal family. In the real world, in the physical world, it was just me. And God was saying, I will allow you to be part of a family that will last for eternity. And so that challenged my life, and to a point of where I felt that like the Lord said, this is the beginning of a new legacy for you. So I memorialized that by changing my name. My last name used to be Hammock. My new name, the first Maxton in the generation of the Lord. So fast forward several years, I get married, have 2 amazing kids. I get to buy my first house. And a home was really big for me because we moved from place to place. Some places were really dirty. Some places were scary to live, poor neighborhoods. Just, you can imagine, maybe you've been in that situation of where the activity around your home, there just was not a safe place. So buying a home for me meant I had somewhere safe to raise my kids. I could feel safe. There could be a place where I could sit down and the electricity would be on. There would be food in the fridge. Something that was just not consistent in my home. And within just a couple of weeks, the Lord started saying, Joe, who are the Maxtons? Who is the legacy that you want to leave? So I remember I was hiking out at South Mountain. Just that was the place where the Lord just spoke to me, just being outdoors, hiking. And I'm just like, God, what are you trying to say? What do you want from me? He said, I want you to define who you are. And there on the mountain, the Lord gave me 3 words: respect, character, and integrity. And that from there, it grew into what we now call the Maxton Code. We respect others, God's character shines in us, and we live with integrity. And it's written on the wall in my dining room. And it's a place where we can go and we can say, this is who I want to be, but this is who I want people to remember who I was. So when I talk with my kids, I'm able to say, that's Maxton Code, or that's not Maxton Code, because, come on, we're humans. Our kids are crazy. Dave got 5 kids, a whole bunch of kids. Like, you have like a basketball team or a football team at your, maybe you should check into that. Do you soccer field? Do you have a good soccer field? This was really the start of just this extraordinary legacy in our home. They become guiding principles for us. When I talk with my kids, they'll tell me stories about what's happened at school or what's happened between the 2 of them. And it's so much easier to be able to say, yeah, that's respect, or that's integrity. You did something that you chose to do the right thing even though nobody was watching. I got a chance to talk with my kids about Maxton Code just this weekend because Dave asked me, because it's frankly been a while. It's hard to stay focused as a parent, to lead our kids towards Christ. So it gave me a chance. And I said, hey guys, what does Maxton Code mean? And they actually remembered. I was like, God, thank you. So this allows us to celebrate forgiveness, grace towards one another. About 4.5 years ago, I found out that my wife had been cheating on me for 7 years, multiple relationships, just a pretty devastating place. And I just didn't know what to do. I had felt like God had given me this promise. He had given me a new name. He had said, you will always have me. I will be there, Joe. How in the world could the Lord allow that to happen? I had suffered through so much brokenness in my life that it just didn't make sense. During that first year, I felt like it just carried just the weight of an elephant, of just shame, when I walked into these doors. I knew my very close community understood my story. They knew who I was. But when people found out that I was divorced, the internal shame and the internal dialogue was, he's a horrible dad, and he must have been a horrible husband. And I just carried this weight, and it was so hard to walk into a space of where we're supposed to be a family. And I felt like God had given me church family to fill in so much gap. And it was just so hard to be here. after time of spending time with a counselor, spending time with my community, I was able to start refocusing my life, refocusing my heart, looking toward the legacy that God had designed for the Maxton family. And really came through two areas. Came through a book, and it came through families in this church. The book is by Andy Stanley. It's called Enemies of the Heart. If you haven't read it, it's short, because I'm not a reader. And it's really good. But this book really challenged me to forgive. Right smack dab in the middle of the book. It's called Forgiveness. That's the title. I'm like, ugh. I had to forgive myself. I had to forgive the men that were involved in this. And it was hard. At first, when I came to the chapter, I closed the book. I'm like, nope, not doing it. And it took a while for the Lord to just speak to me and say, you've got to do this, Joe. Maxtons do the hard work. You've done so much. Do the work. And the other place was through families. I've had friends like the Dennerys and the Wallersheims and the McFarlands and the Tomiches, just families over and over again loving me. But I remember very early on sitting at Ian and Sarah Tomich's house and just talking with them and just being so broken and so sad and just not understanding and them helping me remember who I am. We are created in Christ. We are broken souls. But that doesn't mean that God can't heal us. It doesn't mean that he can't restore life. I thought that the Maxton name was tarnished, but that's not the case. It's just another chapter in my story. It's a chapter of healing. It's a chapter of grace. It's a chapter of love. It's a chapter of restoration that makes a whole book. One page, one chapter does not define who Joe Maxton is, who Eli and Ava Maxton will be. It doesn't define who we'll be. It's the story that the Lord is writing for us. And I have so much hope that my kids will see marriage, they'll see healthy relationship. Our community here will see restoration. I'm so full of hope because my mother and father-in-law, who in the world's eyes should not have community with me, should not maybe even talk to me, chose 2 months ago to come to church here with me because they said, Joe, we love you so much. We love your family. We know who you are. We love your legacy that you're trying to leave for your family, and we will be here beside you. We will love you, and we will be part of your community. That's what the Lord wants for us. So there are good and bad days. Absolutely, we all have them. But I get to rejoice because the Lord has brought healing in my life. He's given me hope beyond what I could ever hope for and imagine. And I'm grateful because of the community of Living Streams, because my pastor is loving on me and saying, Joe, you're worth it. You're enough. You are absolutely enough because you're one of his kids. And so are you guys. Thank you.
Amen. Thanks, Joe. Thank you, Joe. And I mean, it's those of us that know Joe, I mean, we can say it's just awesome to see the way he stands and to see the way he walks in the midst of it all. And I have so much hope for that Maxton name. I just love that that's what God called him to do, was to make this new name, this new legacy in that way. And I'm so excited to see what happens in the years to come with that Maxton name. We're going to prepare our hearts for communion now as we close, and we're going to come to the Lord's table. Once again, our brokenness, meeting his brokenness, and we come away whole. So as they pass out the cup and the bread, just hang on to it and just ask the question, Lord, what is it that you're asking me to do? What is it you're asking me to let go of? Who is it you're asking me to put on my prayer list and make sure I reach out to. You can go ahead and pass it out. And then we'll all take it together at the end.